Delegates, we turn to section 3 of the General Council report, Respect and a Voice at Work. That's the section on welfare from page 56. Delegates, I'll now explain how I intend to take the debate on welfare. I'm going to take motion 29, social security, and motion 30, stop and scrap universal credit, as a single debate. First, I'll call the mover and seconder of motion 29. I'll then call the mover and seconder of motion 30. I'll then call other speakers if we have time. After that, the movers of motion 29 and motion 30 will have the right to reply in that order, and I'll then take the vote on motion 29 and motion 30 in that order. Is that clear? Yeah. Hope so. Thank you. I call motion 29, social security, moved by PCS, seconded by Unite. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Chair. Janice Godrich on behalf of PCS to move motion 29. Colleagues, the welfare state was founded on the principles of a system that is there for us all, and its noble aim sought to provide dignity from the cradle to the grave. This new system was part of a comprehensive policy of social progress that endeavoured to eradicate the grotesque levels of inequality that plagued 1930s Britain. However, since the days of Margaret Thatcher to the present, a war has been waged on the welfare state and the principles that underpin it. For over 40 years, from the Fowler Review onwards, there's been an all-out assault on the social security system. The neoliberal agenda, which has dominated the political landscape for decades, has had at its heart the intention of rolling back the state. There's been a greater ever emphasis on individual responsibility for those who are unfortunate to find themselves in a difficult period in their life. They're deemed to have got themselves into that situation of their own volition, and they're expected to get themselves out of it. The climate that allowed politicians to dismantle the social security system didn't happen overnight, or did it happen in a vacuum. There's been a concerted effort made by governments of all parties to portray the benefit system as overgenerous and those who use it as lazy, feckless scroungers. Claiming benefits is now viewed by many people as a lifestyle choice rather than a necessity for topping up the pay of the poorly paid or supporting the disabled and vulnerable in their daily lives. Demonising benefit claimants has been one of the most effective tools utilised in cultivating public support for massive benefit cuts. Cuts which since 2010 have totaled $34 billion, with $12 billion expected by 2022. Attitudes on welfare have become so toxic that those who are barely keeping themselves financially afloat or are in the middle of an economic crisis have become the subject of prime-time viewing entertainment. The increase in the popularity of so-called poverty porn, Benefit Street can't pay, we'll take it away, and Benefits Britain life on the dole, are symptomatic of the callous way in which public opinion has been cynically manipulated on the welfare state. Programmes such as those only serve to further the stereotypical view of benefit claimants. Work and pension secretaries over the decades haven't been afraid to use deliberately inflammatory language, with one politician quoted as saying punishing people who did not try to find work was the right thing to do, and I want to prove there's more to life than moving from the bedroom to the living room and putting the telly on. And those are the words not of Ian Duncan Smith or Esther McVeigh, but the words of the former New Labour Work and Pension Secretary James Purnell. As it currently stands, the welfare state is failing people. In the past year, 1.3 million emergency food bank parcels given out. 700,000 children are currently living in poverty. Two-thirds of children living in poverty come from a household with at least one working parent or guardian, and there's been a doubling in the number of suicide attempts made particularly by disability benefit claimants. We see a resurgence of rickets, with hospitals reporting an increase in the number of children suffering from this disease. The disastrous rollout of universal credit capitulates the shift towards individual responsibility. In areas where universal credit has been rolled out, food bank use, rent arrears and evictions have soared. The so-called managed migration of universal credit will heap more misery onto 5 million people, especially as those with existing claims on the old system are expected to reapply for universal credit or risk being dropped from the system altogether. Universal credit is beset with problems and PCS have called for the rollout to be stopped in order to address them. Colleagues, 51,000 of our members work in the DWP, but that doesn't mean we think PCS alone should have a say in terms of universal credit. All unions should adopt our policies in terms of fighting for a better social security system. Colleagues, now's the time for a radical transformation of the social security system. We welcome the commitments put forward in Labour's election manifesto last year. We are calling on Labour to be bold and go further. Let's encourage trade unions, charities, think tanks and others to join us in the fight to radically reform the social security system into one that proudly defends those who cannot defend themselves. I move.
Thank you, PCS. I call Unite.
Congress, President Anna Rodri second the motion on behalf of Unite. Congress, this is not the first motion you will ever hear about savage cuts to social security. I would say, and I'm sure it won't be the last, but Congress, it is within our power to make sure that it isn't true. Let's look at the bigger picture. Cuts to social security, the slashing of benefits, the destructive rollout of universal credit is all part of the government's ongoing austerity offensive against our people. Congress, I am a Labour councillor for Princes Park Ward in Liverpool, and the vast majority of the casework I have to deal with is about helping people whose lives are being ruined by austerity and try to pick up the pieces, dealing with increasing food and fuel poverty, feeding children most nights a week, and their parents with hot meals. And Congress, these cuts have targeted claimants and support workers alike. Research from Unite for over 30 advice centres, law centres, citizens' advice centres has found that over 3/4 of our members are reporting surging workloads because of the increased demand and cuts in staff. Congress, the political chaos dominating the headlines clouds the fact that one constant and unwavering feature of the Tory government, from Theresa May back to David Cameron's coalition, is a commitment to austerity. It is an ideological project to crush working class communities, and for 10 years our movement has fought alone. But not anymore. Congress, this motion welcomes the fundamental change which has come from the election of Jeremy Corbyn as Labour leader. Suddenly, the ground is shaken under the Tories' feet as the Labour Party takes its rightful place at our side, smashing the cosy consensus of austerity. This motion calls for the complete overhaul of social security towards a system that's built on the socialist principles, social insurance and a welfare system based on need. Congress, after 10 long years, the end is finally within sight. Support this motion as a first step towards defeating the austerity offensive. I second.
Thank you, Unite. I call motion 30, stop and scrap universal credit. The General Council support the motion. Moved by Dave Allen on behalf of the Disabled Workers Conference and seconded by the NEU. Dave. Somewhere, I hope. Oh, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Congress. Good morning, President. Dave Allen, a representative of Unite the Union, but also a member of the TUC Disabled Workers Committee, moving this motion on behalf of the TUC Disabled Workers Conference. Congress, this motion is calling for an end to universal credit, not a reform. Stop and scrap now. We're also calling for a far-reaching social security reform that truly makes work pay and protect those unable to work. Congress, earlier in the week, we heard John McDonnell. We've been to fringe meetings about the launch of the rolling out of the manifesto for labour law. Congress, we need nothing less in this country than a new beverage report. People need to be treated with dignity. People need to be supported in their communities. People need to be supported into work and staying into work. We can't do this by tinkering around with the system. We need a total and utter review. Last year, Congress, myself and my colleague Sean, who's the comrade with the hat sitting on the General Council table, co-chair of the TUC Disabled Workers Committee, worked with others and Debbie Abrahams, the then Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, to bring the best manifesto for disabled people that was ever put before the electorate of Britain. We need to commit ourselves to doing nothing less than the complete and utter review of the benefit system for the people of Britain. We heard earlier about the direct link between the government's hostile environment policy and the resulting Windrush scandal. The rollout of universal credit is another example of this government's policy exposed as nothing less than a systematic attack on the most vulnerable in our society. And Congress, the human result is proving just as vicious. The rollout of universal credit will fall like a hammer blow upon millions of households, including 1 million low-paid workers. The Disabled Workers Committee has worked tirelessly to warn of the impact of universal credit, how the delays are pushing people further into the mire of debt, the utter lack of support for disabled claimants, a worsening of the housing crisis as landlords refuse to lease claimants. Once again, Congress, we need to commit ourselves to a total and utter review of the benefit system, a new beverage report. Support your disabled colleagues. Support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. I call the NEU. Do I have unison?
Mandy Hudson, National Education Union, very pleased to be able to second this motion that came through the Disabled Workers Conference. You probably already know that there are 1 million people currently on universal credit, and out of those, 41% have long-term health conditions, and 25% will clearly have protection under the Equality Act. And as you know, there's a further 2.3 million people who are liable to have to suffer universal credit as it's further rolled out. And that's why we know that it's a system that's not working and it should be stopped and scrapped. There's an incredible loss of income going on as well. Two men recently took the government to court over the loss of severe disability premiums, and they won. And consistently, the government is losing in court over the injustice that's being caused to many people, including disabled people, over universal credit and other benefits. In the previous motion, it was noted that food bank usage is increased by over 50% in those areas where universal credit has been rolled out. And for many people, that's because they have to wait so long for those benefits to come in. There's already this official 5-week wait before universal credit comes, but actually it's much longer than that. 20,000 people have to wait more than 3 months. The figures are just appalling, and yet this government just doesn't seem to care. And so that's why we're calling on the TUC to campaign around universal credit, to call for it to be stopped and scrapped. And I also want to just share a story from one of my union colleagues about a pupil that they know in one of the schools. And it's a young boy who's awaiting a diagnosis of autism, and his mum's on low-paid work, and she needs the time sometimes to go to appointments with the boy, and also to to manage him when he's been unfortunately excluded from school. And that means that she often means that she has to, her benefits are paused, the universal credits paused, so she can't budget properly, she hasn't got money to pay her bills, there's no money for transport, for appointments. And I want to quote my colleague who said that no parent should have to cry themselves to sleep at night worrying about keeping a roof over their families' heads, and no child should ever go hungry. I remember watching Theresa May on the steps of Downing Street when she became Prime Minister, going on about the just about managing. Well, she's broken that promise, but the TUC will continue to support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I call Udison.
President, Congress, Angie Roberts speaking and supporting motion 29 on behalf of Unison. Congress, for thousands of people moving on to universal credit has been a nightmare. Even John Major described it as operationally messy, socially unfair and unforgiving. And as the Ken Loach film, I, Daniel Blake, so ably demonstrated, the current system dehumanises people. For some, it has led to destitution, and for others, tragically, it has driven them to take their own lives. As the TUC said in its response to the Social Security Advisory Committee, universal credit, based on its current design and on the experience of the rollout so far, is not ready for the next phase of managed migration. The rollout of universal credit has been shambolic. Warning after warning about the new system has just been ignored. And the TUC has repeatedly called out the rollout of universal credit to be stopped and for a fundamental rethink of the policy. The original white paper said, the government is committed to ensuring no one loses as a direct result of these reforms. We have ensured that no one will experience a reduction in the benefit they receive as a result of the introduction of universal credit. Thousands of people know that claim was a lie. It isn't just the fact that you have to claim online, even though many are unable to, or the fact that you may face delays if you haven't got a bank account or building society account, or that you're driven into debt from the outset because you don't get your money for at least 5 weeks. Or that 1 in 4 don't get the right money on time, or that 40% waited 11 weeks or more for full payment. It isn't just the fact that without money you can't feed your kids, pay the rent, put money in the gas or the electric meter, or that universal credit fluctuates, creating chaos for family finances, or that sanctions regimes that accompanies it are pernicious, or that we have a 2-child limit, or that all the money goes to one person, often undermining women's financial independence. But Congress, it is also that where full universal credit services have been rolled out, we've seen an increase in rent arrears, food bank use, greater numbers driven into debt, and more people forced into the hands of payday lenders. Now we face the prospect of mandatory migration as 3 million families are moved onto universal credit by 2023, and every one of them is set to face an unnecessary gap in their incomes as their migration to the new system. Congress, universal credit is not fit for purpose, it is not ready for the mandatory migration, and it must be halted. Thank you. Please support the motion.
Thank you. Thanks, Angela. I'm looking to PCS. Do you need your right to reply? Thank you. No. I'm looking to Dave Allen for the... thank you. Thank you. I'm going to take the vote then on motion 29. Congress. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. All those against, please show. Thank you. That's carried unanimously. I call the vote on motion 30. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. All those against, please show. That's also carried unanimously. Thank you.